Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 22nd of April 2013, the podcast that sharpens your mind while you do the dishes. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me again this week, you may know him as FS Blue Apocalypse on the Bogosity.tv forum. Welcome back to the show, Jonathan Loesche.
Great to be back, and hey, maybe we'll be doing this again in about 6 months from Gitmo if CISPA goes as planned.
Also joining me again is the man known as Lord T. Hawkeye on the Bogosity.tv forum, as well as on YouTube and DeviantArt. Welcome back, Tim Dyson.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be back.
Well, let's cross the finish line with the news of the Bogus. Yeah, I think the first thing we have to cover here is the bombing that happened in the Boston Marathon. 2 bombs went off, 3 people were killed, and 183 were injured.
First and foremost, it's just a real tragedy. If I never have to see that picture of that one guy who had both of his legs blown off.
The one in the wheelchair?
Yes. If I never have to see that again in my life, it'll be too soon.
It's just so heartbreaking when you look at the aerial photos of after they cleared everything out, but there was still like blood everywhere. It was terrible.
Yeah, it's been really hard to get anything concrete on it. I mean, I read a lot of newspapers talking all about it, and even now their motives for what they did is really shaky. I haven't been able to get anything definite. Well,
at least they caught that second guy alive. So maybe after, whatever kind of court hearing or everything we're going to get from that, we'll get some answers about that. But that was my fear after they killed the first guy. If they killed the second guy, then we'll never have any idea what this was all about.
The thing that I come with is the fact that Boston was pretty much put under martial law there for almost a full 24 hours.
Yeah.
That to me is the shocking coming away. That is the fact that the first real successful terrorist attack since September 11th. And what's our response to throw away the Constitution immediately and basically say, you have no rights. You are confined to your homes. You can't, only the police can be out. You need to stay in your home shut in, cowering in fear.
Well, it's like they thought that there were all of a sudden going to be, all these other bombings too. And of course, that's not how it works. When you go through and do a terrorist attack and bomb, you don't stick around and just keep doing it. You do it and then you run off. Well, I will say this much. Once the Boston PD got out of martial arts mode and actually got into investigating it, I've actually heard reports that they're actually very good about respecting people's constitutional rights. Like when they said, we want to search your home, and they say, well, if you don't have a warrant, I don't want you to search it. They respected that. I haven't heard any reports about them, busting down people's doors and searching their homes without warrant. And it's amazing that when they behave like that, they catch the guys in less than a week. Whereas if they do like the LAPD and they bust down everyone's doors and they shoot up a whole bunch of people or something, they can never seem to catch the guy.
Yeah, because no one will cooperate with them. Gee, I wonder why. A lot of people will defend the martial law thing. Oh, it was necessary as an emergency. But the thing is, they need to stop and question, is that really the best way of going about it? No, probably not. Because if you go around scaring people, then they're not going to help you. And we've seen lots of times how the people are your best bet in finding criminals if you can get their cooperation. And that's why you have to not scare them. You have to let them know that you're on their side if you're really serious about protecting them.
Absolutely. Well, and of course, the social media kind of exploded. And yeah, there were all the conspiracy. I think it took half an hour or something for someone with Alex Jones to come out and say it was a false flag.
The world's fastest detective, apparently.
Yeah. But despite all those conspiracy theories, there was a lot of good stuff in social media, too. And this is a story on IO9. It kind of gives me hope that the enlightened people out there outnumber the conspiracy mongers. The Boston Police Department actually used it, not only asking for tips, but asking the people who give them tips, please sit on this information until we know how valid it is. And people were very good about respecting that. There was one from, and I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Amanda Sonlin, something like that, saying that the MGH has enough blood on hand for the tragedy today, but they'll need blood later this week to replenish, which is something else that you have after this. You have this just explosion of people wanting to help out, and this is the thing to remember, that can be kind of fleeting, but if you want to help out, well, just kind of wait a couple of days and then go there and donate blood.
Yeah, it's very encouraging to see people when they help in a tragedy like this. And people are always telling me, oh, we need the tyranny because everyone are horrible. And I point this as, no, they're not. I'm sorry. There's just simply no evidence of that.
Yeah, I every time there's something that, just makes you say, oh, screw it. I've given up on humanity. Why? And then something like this comes along where, you see everyone looking to help out and looking to fill their role, do their part, whatever you want. It is very uplifting in what is otherwise a very bleak, very tragic story. And kudos to everyone who helped out.
The best thing I ever read about it is from actor and comedian Patton Oswalt, who turns out looks like he's a pretty good writer, too. This is what he posted to his Facebook page. And I'm going to read out the whole thing because it's really, really good. So this is Patton Oswalt. Quote, I remember when 9/11 went down, my reaction was, well, I've had it with humanity. But I was wrong. I don't know what's going to be revealed to be behind all of this mayhem, one human insect or a poisonous mass of broken sociopaths. But here's what I do know. If it's one person or 100 people, that number is not even a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of the population on this planet. You watch the videos of the carnage, and there are people running towards the destruction to help out. This is a giant planet, and we're lucky to live on it. But there are prices and penalties incurred for the daily miracle of existence. One of them is, every once in a while, the wiring of a tiny sliver of the species gets snarled, and they're pointed towards darkness. But the vast majority stands against that darkness, and like white blood cells attacking a virus, they dilute and weaken and eventually wash away the evildoers and, more importantly, the damage they wreak. This is beyond religion or creed or nation. We would not be here if humanity were inherently evil. We'd have eaten ourselves alive long ago. So when you spot violence or bigotry or intolerance or fear or just garden variety misogyny, hatred, or ignorance, just look it in the eye and think, the good outnumber you, and we always will.
Bravo.
Patton Oswalt is now one of my favorite people in the world.
Yes, indeed.
Unfortunately, we can't say the same thing about a lot of people in the news media, though. And this is from the Skeptical Libertarian, which is also where I learned of that Patton Oswalt quote. And he has the 6 worst media reactions to the Boston Marathon bombing. The first one is, guess who, Alex Jones, talking it out for a false flag. Number 2 is Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times, and he posted to Twitter, quote, explosion is a reminder that ATF needs a director. Shame on Senate Republicans for blocking appointment. Yeah, I'm sure if they hadn't done that, the ATF would have just been able to stop it all from happening.
What's the ATF again?
Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
Just a little more bureaucracy and we'll all be in nirvana any day now.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when it was just alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. They added in the explosives later. I guess they finally realized that alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are all legal, so why do they need to exist?
M80s are legal. So why the explosives part then?
Yep.
And as we learned from West Texas, fertilizer is perfectly legal.
Well, this next one is from Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post, and there's a little bit of background that goes along with this one. There was controversy of Kermit Gosnell, which is that abortion doctor who apparently was performing illegal abortions and doing all these horrible, horrific things. And Post reporter Sarah Cliff tweeted she wasn't writing about the case because, quote, I cover policy for the Washington Post, not local crime. And that was just outrage among the pro-lifers. So Jennifer Rubin then posted, not writing on Boston, it's a local crime story for now. It's like, come on.
Classy.
I mean, at least Alex Jones is being genuine in his nuttiness.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you can't even get mad at the guy. It's like that friend who gets drunk every week. It becomes fascinating. He gets wondering what's he going to do next.
And then there's Luke Russert of NBC. That's number 4. Quote, I was at Fenway Park with my dad and Mike Barnacle during Waco, which was on Patriots Day in 1993, speculating on possible link.
Yeah, I'm a terrorist, I'm building a bomb, but I'm going to wait for this specific day because...
Yeah, it's just people searching for explanations. And
Well, brace yourself for Eric Rush.
Oh, Lordy.
Fox News. On Twitter, he posted, quote, Everybody do the national security ankle grab. Let's bring more Saudis in without screaming them. Come on. Hashtag Boston Marathon. And a few minutes later, a guy named Bill Schmalfelt, I'm not sure who that is, but he replied, "Sweet God, are you already blaming Muslims?" And Rush replied, quote, "Yes, they're evil. Let's kill them all."
Murder is murder, except when we do it because we're special.
Right.
Yeah, well, doesn't the other side think that too?
It's only murder if you kill Americans.
Just the level of stupidity in that comment. I mean, the ironies there. Oh God.
The funny thing is, the policies these people preach for wouldn't have stopped these guys, and it wouldn't have stopped the 9/11 terrorists anyway. Like, they were all in America totally legally.
Yeah.
So that's not the problem.
And they weren't even Arabic, they were Chechenian.
Mm-hmm.
Close enough in his eyes, he'd probably say.
Yeah, maybe.
It's from some place he can't point on a map, but that's most of the world for most Americans.
I found George Takei's Facebook feed to be a much better source of information than any news outlet I ever found.
Yeah, story keeps changing and everybody keeps adding in their 2 cents. It's just such a cluster everywhere.
Well, one more brickbat before we move on. You can always rely on religious people to show the absolute worst of humanity. The Harvard humanist community was excluded from a memorial ceremony for the victims of the bombing, and that included author Greg Epstein, who said, quote, "We have friends and family who are in the hospital in critical condition who nearly died. It wouldn't have been so difficult for those who organized the vigil today to make some kind of nod to us, and that's all we would have wanted." But they couldn't even do that, despite the fact that this was an interfaith memorial service. Atheists just weren't allowed.
I don't know, is there this idea going around that atheists don't mourn their dead or something like that?
Well, and I mean, this wasn't like a little thing. President Obama spoke at the event. I think the governor was there too. The Harvard humanists appealed to the president's staff and to the governor's staff to be included in this. Nothing.
Yeah, so that little naughty game in his welcoming speech was all just hot air. Mm-hmm. Who would have guessed?
Yeah. Oh, but he's really an atheist. He just can't come out and say it, but he really is one of us.
Right.
God, it's not surprising to me. It's unfortunate, and we're one of the last minorities you can still legally make fun of.
Yeah, didn't that poll find statistically you will see a gay president before you ever see an atheist one?
Yeah.
I think there were a couple back in like the 1800s or something.
Yeah.
It's a little up in the air what exactly they believed, but these days, not a chance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That said, Boston, I'm truly sorry for what happened to you, but you truly make me proud by the way you've reacted and the way you've been able to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. And I hope this won't hurt your faith in humanity and that you'll be able to get on with your lives. Keep the peace.
So, Jonathan, you're going to tell us about Florida shutting down internet cafes?
Oh, dear. Yeah, okay, long story short, there was a court case several years ago. Through good old technicalities and loopholes, essentially, while quote-unquote gambling was illegal, sweepstakes were not.
Now, what's the difference between gambling and sweepstakes?
Well, basically, all these parlors would set up, and they would have computers running card games, or roulette wheels, or slot machines, or whatever. But because they were set up on an algorithm that, 1 out of every 50 people would hit a jackpot or something like that, they weren't considered actual games of chance and then therefore legal in the state.
That makes no sense to me.
It really doesn't, but this is, again, the legal. So all these parlors, just a chicken in every pot, a car in every garage, and a sweepstakes parlor in every strip mall at one point in Florida. So then Florida said, oh, no, we need to clarify this, because everyone was doing the typical, oh, what about grandma? She's going to be throwing away her Social Security check, playing these sweepstakes things, and the government has to protect her from that. So then they came up with an even better idea. We're going to throw you in the same thing as how a church can run bingos and stuff, and you have to donate at least X amount of your profits to charity. Well, the largest one of these, which was Allied Veteran, they said, okay, yeah, we're gonna donate all this money to, veterans. And what they actually did was they just set up a bunch of shell corporations that did nothing just to launder money back to the business owners.
Oh.
Like, right before this, they all got busted. Like, Rick Scott, our governor, spoke at their annual meeting and declared them, like, finest examples of citizens of Florida. Practically every politician from city council on up in Florida had received some sizable campaign donation for them.
So what happened then?
Well, like I said, there was a lot more groups than just this Allied veteran. Even, like, these online places that were abiding by the rules and were donating profits to charity, they all got shut down too.
So they shut down the good law-abiding ones and not just the ones who were cheating.
Exactly. They totally outlawed the whole thing. One of the few acts of charity that Allied veterans group actually did was they bought 2 homes in a neighborhood, and they set them up as sort of halfway houses for veterans who were, alcoholics, drug addicts, whatever. The state government seized both houses and kicked all of the veterans out as asset forfeiture.
Yes, respect our vets until they become inconvenient to you.
Exactly. So, by some estimates, 15,000 people in the state were employed by these things.
Wow.
So, literally overnight, 15,000 people lost their jobs by fiat from the government.
So thousands of people lose their jobs. All these charities lose, however much in donations.
Mm-hmm.
For what reason?
Because one company was evil and, oh, by the way, happened to be a major funder of, like I said, every major politician in the state, so they had the egg on their face.
There's a funny irony in all this. This all started with the fact that gambling is illegal. Even though there's no moral argument you can make against gambling, because it's a financial risk, and yet you don't ban investment, and really, is there any time you can spend your money where there's not some element of risk to it?
Well, and there's no victim. There's no one you're hurting except arguably yourself.
Then they argue, oh, but some people get addicted to bad things. Well, there's lots of people who buy compulsively and bankrupt themselves, but you can't really ban buying things. That doesn't work. But think about this. Their argument for banning gambling in the first place is because some people it's going to lead some people to financial ruin. And now we get this, where you've just gotten rid of internet cafes and caused financial ruin to a ton of people. Probably far more than gambling ever could have.
Yeah.
I love the moral relativism by but if you donate it to charity, if it's not for profit, now all of a sudden, screw the guy who's in financial ruin, it's okay now.
Yeah, that's how it always happens. You start with a faulty premise, it just gets more complicated and more complicated and more complicated until the whole thing just becomes a complete mess and falls apart. Like someone once pointed out, when they started with the idea that Earth was the center of the universe, they had to keep coming up with more and more complicated theories to explain the way the heavenly bodies moved until the whole thing was just a complete mess.
Yeah.
We need gambling should be legalized in this state, although that's never going to happen as long as the Seminole Indian tribe has a virtual monopoly, and they make more than enough money to keep the legislature's palms greased, so...
Does Florida have a lottery?
Yeah, we do.
That's another monopoly that'll be threatened.
Mm-hmm. They have a lot of casino boats that'll go out into international waters and then come back. That's another big industry here, but...
Wait, you're saying prohibition doesn't work? Who'd have thought?
I
could have a heart attack and die from the shock any second.
Well, this little podcast is actually moving along. I just bought our first Facebook ad to direct people to the Facebook page and hopefully from there to the podcast and website. And, this is the sort of thing that people's donations make possible. But I don't always like just begging for money. I like to give people something of value. Hopefully this podcast is something of value, but if you need something else, how about this? Have you ever given out your business card to someone and your email ends in someoneelsesname.com? That doesn't look very professional, does it? And hey, did they pay you to advertise their brand on your business card? Of course not. So why don't you go on over to GoDaddy.com and get that domain name to use for your new website or email address. Just type in the code WOWNOBOGON and get 20% off. That's WOWNOBOGON, 20% off. And if you order by April 30th, it's 35% off, and it'll help this podcast too. Isn't that great?
Awesome.
So just go to GoDaddy.com and use the code WOWNOBOGON. We've got some updates on this hunger strike in Guantanamo. Apparently, there were 4 non-lethal rounds fired at detainees, and they forced them all into their individual cells to stop this hunger strike. And they say 43 detainees are at the hunger strike, and 13 of those are being force-fed.
Oh, yeah, I read that, and I read horror stories, and I found that very difficult to read.
Yeah. H.P. Lovecraft has nothing on these guys.
Yeah, what was that about, when Obama first got elected, we were going to shut down Guantanamo?
Yeah, whatever happened with that?
And the funny thing is, people still pretend to be shocked. What? A politician lied to me? That doesn't happen. Give me a break, people. Even I don't think you're that gullible. You can't possibly be.
Well, the heartbreaking thing is a letter written from one of these detainees. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but it's called Gitmo is Killing Me. And I'm just going to read out pieces of it, but he just says that he knows a man here who weighs just 77 pounds and another 98. But he's been at Guantanamo for 11 years. He should have been home years ago. No one thinks he's a threat. He's never received a trial, not really been charged with anything. The military said he was a guard for Osama bin Laden. There was just nothing to that at all, and even the people there don't seem to believe it anymore. But he says, but they don't seem to care how long I sit here either. And he talks about his home was in Yemen, and he thought he could get a better job in Afghanistan. It didn't work. There was no work there in Afghanistan, but he didn't have enough money to get home. After the American invasion in 2001, he fled to Pakistan. The Pakistans arrested him when he asked to see someone from the Yemeni embassy, and he was sent to Kandahar and then from there to Gitmo. And so he's been participating in this hunger strike, and as he says, quote, "A squad of 8 military police officers in riot gear burst in. They tied my hands and feet to the bed. They forcibly inserted an IV into my hand. I spent 26 hours in this state tied to the bed. I was not permitted to go to the toilet. They inserted a catheter, which was painful, degrading, and unnecessary. I was not even permitted to pray. I will never forget the first time they passed the feeding tube up my nose. I can't describe how painful it is to be force-fed this way. As it was thrust in, it made me feel like throwing up. I wanted to vomit, but I couldn't. There was agony in my chest, throat, and stomach. I had never experienced such pain before. I would not wish this cruel punishment upon anyone. I am still being force-fed. 2 times a day they tie me to a chair in my cell. My arms, legs, and head are strapped down. I never know when they will come. Sometimes they come during the night, as late as 11 p.m. when I'm sleeping."
Absolutely horrible.
Apparently they don't even have enough personnel there to do all the force feeding, so they just kind of have to do it round the clock, just trying to keep up as much as they can.
And they went into this saying that they're the heroes going to stop terrorism. Now, your Imperial Stormtroopers wiping out the Ewoks, to make a nerdy analogy. Ugh.
I don't want to speak my mind, or else you'll probably get a 18+ slap on this podcast for what I wanted to really say about this.
I appreciate the restraint. Well, here's how he closes out. Quote, "I do not want to die here, but until President Obama and Yemen's president do something, that is what I risk every day. Where is my government? I will submit to any security measures they want in order to go home, even though they are totally unnecessary. I will agree to whatever it takes in order to be free. I am now 35. All I want is to see my family again and start a family of my own. The situation is desperate now. All of the detainees here are suffering deeply. At least 40 people here are on a hunger strike. People are fainting with exhaustion every day. I have vomited blood, and there is no end in sight to our imprisonment. Denying ourselves food and risking death every day is the choice we have made. I just hope that because of the pain we are suffering, the eyes of the world will once again look to Guantanamo before it is too late."
This is the inevitable result of imperialism. I don't care what good intentions they say. This is the inevitable result.
Well, sorry to tell you, but this next story is not any cheerier. There was a suicide note from a man named Evan Abel, and I don't think he actually did it, but he sent a suicide note to a friend of his in prison. He was recently released from prison, and he had been in solitary confinement and experienced all of this humiliation and torture, only having 1 hour a day outside of it and so forth. And so his friend in prison, Troy Anderson, talked about his letter, and he said, quote, I got a letter from him last week saying goodbye, that he loved me, my family. He didn't feel like he belonged in the free world. He was consumed by what they did to him in prison. So, I mean, you got this guy who's been in solitary confinement for who knows how long, and then all of a sudden his prison turns up and he's just released into the real world and said, okay, there you go.
Human beings are not supposed to be cooped up with no one around them for days, let alone weeks at a time. I mean, since I've started working from home, I purposely try to make sure I go into work in the office at least once a week just for those, just for the little social interaction. I can't imagine being locked in jail for 23 hours a day.
It's something I always ask. If government's supposed to lead us to the future, why are we still dealing with crime the exact same way we did in the medieval age? That is embarrassing.
Well, and this Troy Anderson guy he wrote to, he spent 16 years in solitary confinement. Excuse me, administrative segregation.
Ah, okay.
Because he's suffering from mental illness, which is what landed him in prison. A lot of mentally ill people who aren't properly treated, they end up resorting to drug use, and people who resort to drug use end up engaging in robbery and other crimes and things like that. And he's been in solitary for 16 years. He sued the state for depriving him of sunlight, fresh air, and mental health treatment. And this mental health treatment, the medications that are available to him, could have gotten him to the point where he was in the mental state where he could have gotten out of isolation and gotten into the prison population. And they've even been denying him that medication. And the judge ruled that their denying of outdoor exercise to prisoners at the facility was cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah, they create monsters and then say we need them to protect us from monsters.
But I mean, they say prison is supposed to rehabilitate people, and then they've paid their debts to society and they can go back in the world. Not only do they do nothing at all to equip them for going back into the world, they seem hell-bent on just ruining their mental state so that they can't function in society. They might, all they really know is a life of imprisonment and violence and harboring thoughts of revenge and things like that.
Yeah.
Oh, and repaying your debt to society, that is just the most laughable term I've ever heard. I mean, if you hurt someone and go to jail, your victim doesn't get 1 cent.
Yeah.
In fact, you get locked up on his dime. There's no repaying his debt to society. It's just it's just an excuse for a shakedown.
Yeah, nothing's actually repaid.
One of the most enlightening conversations I've ever had in my life was a cousin of my best friend. He just did, I think, like 6 or 7 years in jail for armed robbery. A couple of weeks after he'd been released, and my buddy was having a cookout, and I got talking to him. This guy fit the phrase institutionalized better than any person I knew. It was obvious that he did not know anything other than a life in prison at this point. And within 2 weeks after that, he was caught breaking into a house and is now serving another 10-year sentence.
Well, this Evan Abel guy, before he wrote the suicide note, and apparently this is what prompted him, he's a suspect in the murder of 2 pizza delivery men. So this is what happens when you get released from prison. You're not really equipped to go back into society.
If you go to jail and your crime was, hey, you had an ounce of pot on you, well, sorry, that's a felony. But even after you've been institutionalized, you're virtually unhireable, even if you did have job skills.
Yeah, they do that all the time, like with the sex offender registry list. Hey, let's put you on a list that'll completely isolate you from society. That's a great way to get them back in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you can't hold it and you pee on a tree, you get put on a list with child rapists and people like that. Well, I think I'm going to let Anderson have the last word on this one. Quote, "You know what they do through their solitary policies is akin to rape. They steal such a precious part of our souls, our humanity, our ability to be. They committed such hateful acts on us. Through contempt and disdain, they breed rage. They stole his chance at any real future." So tell me something, guys. When you were taught history and economics in school, do you think they did a good job?
No.
FDR saved America. That's what I learned.
Well, if you guys want to learn more about real history and economics, or know people who do, you can just go over to libertyclassroom.com. You'll learn U.S. history, Western Civ, and economics from actual university professors. So check out the free material there. They've got introductory lectures on all these subjects. And if you want to sign up and get all of their lectures at all of the levels, it's just $99 a year. That's less than the price of 2 cups of coffee a month.
And I don't even drink coffee.
Hey, see, you can afford it already.
Indeed.
But guess what? If you type in the promo code Bogosity in all caps, you'll get your first year for just $88. That's 1 fast food meal every month. So instead of driving around scarfing your mouth with the drive-through stuff, why don't you just scarf down some food for your mind instead? Because you can download these lectures and listen to them in your car, or watch them on your computer or your smart device, and learn at your own pace. And you'll even get access to the professors themselves via the discussion forum and even live video chats. So go to libertyclassroom.com and don't forget that promo code Bogosity in all caps. Okay, enough commercializing. It's time to stem the epidemic of this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And you know who's back?
Who?
Andrew Wakefield.
The man is like a comic book villain. He just doesn't give up.
If only he was only as incompetent as most comic book villains. The only comic villain who might have a bigger death toll in their hands is the Joker. I mean, the amount of children every day who are now dying of preventable diseases because of his original study.
Hey, at least the Joker doesn't try to convince you he's a good guy.
That's true. It was actually published in The Independent. He wrote this big press release full of distortions and everything, and of course The Independent just published it letter for letter. And what's going on is there's a measles outbreak in Wales, over in Swansea. And, of course, the reason for it is because measles vaccination is down. But, of course, he can't admit that. He can never admit that. So, who does he blame? The government.
Thinks he can jump on our bandwagon, can he?
I'm all for blaming the government when they really do something wrong, but geez, they're talking about all these, cover-ups and everything.
It is amazing that there's still people who take this man seriously. This is a guy who was kicked out of the NHS for misconduct. To me, that's like being kicked out of the Gestapo for cruelty.
Yeah.
Does anybody bother to even fact check what this guy has said over the years or looked into any of his previous history?
Well, I mean, and The Independent knows this, and I'll get into this in a minute. I mean, they've gone after him before, but here they are, publishing letter for letter this whole screed. When he keeps doing it, he keeps blaming the MMR, which is a triumvirate vaccine, and says that it needs to be replaced with a single-shot measles-only vaccine. Guess who holds the patent for a single-shot measles vaccine?
I really couldn't say.
Yeah, that would be Wakefield himself. Yeah, so accompanied along with this is this big story they wrote. And the story was originally titled, MMR Scare Doctor, This Outbreak Proves I Was Right. And I was kind of tempted to revoke the Independent's status in this when they went and edited, they changed it, and now the title of the article is Balderdash, Experts Damning Verdict on the Latest Claims of Discredited MMR Scaremonger Andrew Wakefield. But it would have been a lot better if they had just gone out of the gate with that title, and not changed it, only days later after everyone complained.
Well, at least it's reassuring. There are enough people who see that the guy's a complete fraud.
Yeah, and it is pretty scathing, and they did try to do some damage control with a letter from the editor, but they were trying to say things. Well, the title is Letter from the Editor, Wakefield's MMR rant was read out of context. What does that even mean?
Okay, anytime someone says I'm wrong, I'm not wrong, I'm just out of context. Boom. Bulletproof.
Yeah. I mean, if they had come out and said, all right, we shouldn't have read, that was a bad headline, we shouldn't have done that, it was misleading and we're sorry, then fine, no problem, but don't try to just kind of worm your way out of it.
By the way, what exactly is his argument that it's government's fault about the measles outbreak?
Here's what Wakefield says exactly. In September 1998, the British government withdrew the importation license for the single vaccines, effectively blocking this option for parents. Measles cases in the UK rose when the government withdrew the importation license for the single measles vaccine, leaving concerned parents with no choice. When I demanded to know why, if the government's principal concern was to protect children from measles, It would prevent parents with genuine safety concerns over MMR from protecting their children. Elizabeth Miller of the Health Protection Agency responded, "If we allowed parents the choice of the single measles vaccine, it would destroy our MMR program. The government's concern appeared to be to protect the MMR program over and above the protection of children." The problem is there are no genuine safety concerns with the MMR.
You'd think someone with his expertise would know that.
Yeah, I'm sure he does, but that's the thing. He's trying to get his single vaccine that he can make lots of money for. So his reasoning is he spread out all this misinformation about MMR and scared everyone into not taking it, and then they didn't have another alternative they could turn to, and therefore it's the government's fault, not his.
And this guy has the nerve to tell people to follow the money?
Yeah.
Really? This guy? Follow who's been lining his paycheck.
Yeah.
Pretty sinister.
Oh yeah, all sorts of the lawyers who have been backing him up on this and all the stuff there, they're heavily involved, with the anti-vaccination crowd. They make lots of money out of this.
Didn't he originally fudge the numbers because they wanted to sue some pharmaceutical companies?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he actually falsified hospital records as well.
Yeah, what if the hospital had acted on those false records? Somebody could have been hurt.
Well, I don't think he actually broke into the hospital and changed the records there. I think he changed, the records that he had got from them when he did the report.
Yeah, still could possibly have caused some confusion.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, he certainly deserved the Pegasus Award he won for most steadfast refusal to accept reality.
Well, and they're trying to get the vaccination levels up in Swansea to stem this, but they're just so low, it's taking a lot of effort. But that's why Andrew Wakefield, and I'm sorry, I'm still going to say The Independent as well, are both this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now it's time to deport this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! And this time, it goes to the country of Saudi Arabia, which seems to have taken the stupid to new levels. 3 delegates from the United Arab Emirates were deported by the Mutaween, basically the God Police, because, get this, they were too good-looking.
I guess it's preferable to them being stoned.
What? I read that. I was like, this does not even seem real. This is like something from The Onion. This sounds like a joke I would make about Saudi Arabia.
It actually is, according to their newspaper, Alaf, quote, "A festival official said the 3 Emiratis were taken out on the grounds that they are too handsome and that the Commission for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vices members feared female visitors could fall for them." What's the matter, guys? Can't take the competition?
It's like, how do you enforce something like that? Because beauty is a really subjective thing, first of all.
Well, I mean, the idea is, if the women see these handsome men, then they'll be, tempted into, doing all these bad sexual things or whatever, I guess. I don't know. I've stopped trying to figure it out.
Oh, Lordy.
And the problem with that be what? They'd both be a little tired and a little happier. I fail to see a downside to this.
I've never understood what it is in religion after religion, Christianity, Islam, pretty much all of them. What's their beef with sex?
It feels good, and you're not supposed to feel good in this life. That's supposed to happen in the next life. It's how you manipulate people. You tell them, no, you don't live this life for yourself. You live it for the Almighty God, as in us. So it's all just how to manipulate people into throwing their lives away just for you. These people are so arrogant, they think that human lives all deserve to be thrown into the grinder just for their benefit.
Well, it's like they try to convince people that anything that feels good, anything they enjoy is a sin, and that's proof that the devil is in your head. That's temptation. The fact that you want to do something that you enjoy.
Ugh. Yeah. It really, you gotta wonder what their authorities are like. Are they really so bored that they're worrying about stuff like this? Have you solved every murder, all the kidnappings, all the robberies, and now you're just doing little things here and there?
It's just hard to find any words, is it?
Yes, indeed. It's like trying to make fun of a clown. What am I going to say?
I can think of 2 very relevant words to describe Saudi Arabia for this, and that is being this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! Well, that wraps up this Have It Your Way edition of the Bogosity podcast. Please visit the forums at Bogosity.tv, where you can read the show notes and join the discussion on these and other subjects. This podcast is free but not free to produce, so please donate via PayPal or Bitcoin at the top of the Bogosity.tv website or down the right-hand side of the podcast page, and give generously to keep this podcast going. And if you'd like to contribute to the podcast, just send a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@bogosity.tv. Put it in an audio file, and if it's good enough, it'll get played right in the podcast. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Tim Dyson and Jonathan Loesche, for joining me.
Great to be back.
Thank you very much for your kind attention, everyone. And as I always say, be aware and be wise.
Until next time, here's a quote from John Shuey. The terrorists don't hate America because of its freedoms. The Republicans and Democrats hate America because of its freedom. The terrorists hate America because of the Republicans and Democrats. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 Imported License.
Bogosity.